The medical teams rushed onto the arena floor as soon as the Cathani elder gave them permission. And they found something that confused their professional expectations. Entirely, the human and the Vrexian were standing together, supporting each other's weight. And neither one seemed willing to let go first. "We need to separate you for treatment," the lead medic said with bewilderment. "In a moment," Una replied. "We are having a conversation. You are both severely injured. We noticed." Torvak made a sound that might have been laughter if his throat had been working properly. "She's always like this," he rasped. "Stubborn beyond all reason. You have known her for less than 2 hours. 2 hours of combat teaches you more about a person than 2 years of conversation." The medical teams eventually succeeded in separating the two warriors and transporting them to treatment facilities on opposite sides of the station. But word of what had happened in the arena spread faster than any shuttle could travel. The human had won through sheer determination. And then she had helped her defeated opponent stand. This was not how the Dominion understood warriors. And it was not how they understood victory in the diplomatic chambers later that day. The representatives of 12 species gathered to discuss the implications of what they had witnessed. The Vrexian ambassador was notably subdued, and he did not raise any objections when the human territorial claims were formally recognized. But the conversation quickly moved beyond the border dispute to larger questions about humanity's place in the galactic community. "We have underestimated them," the Veshan representative admitted. "I confess that I viewed humans as a minor species, too young and too weak to matter in galactic affairs." "As did we all," the Cathani elder replied. "But today we have learned that weakness and strength are not always what they appear to be." "What do you mean?" "Consider what we witnessed. The human was smaller and weaker and less equipped for combat than her opponent. By every objective measure, she should have lost. But she did not lose because she possessed something that Torvik did not. Stubbornness. More than that," the elder said. "She possessed the absolute conviction that surrender was not an option. And that conviction proved to be more powerful than scales and claws and venom in the human medical facility. Una was receiving treatment for injuries that would have killed a member of any other species. The doctors worked to repair torn muscle and cracked bone, to flush the remaining venom from her system, to close wounds that had bled more than seemed survivable. Throughout it all, she remained conscious and aware. And when Ambassador Chun came to visit her, she managed a weak smile. "We did it," she said. "You did it," he corrected. "I have never seen anything like what you accomplished today. I just kept getting up. That is exactly what made it remarkable. No one has ever beaten a Vrexian champion through endurance before. You showed the entire Dominion something they have never seen." "What is that?" "You showed them what humans are made of." There was a knock at the door, and a medical attendant entered with an unexpected announcement. "Ambassador, the Vrexian delegation is requesting permission to speak with Sergeant Park." Chun looked at Una with concern. "You do not have to agree to this." "Let them in," she said. The Vrexian ambassador entered with Torvak beside him. And the champion was moving stiffly but under his own power. He approached Una's medical bed and stood looking down at her with an expression that she could not easily read. "I came to thank you," he said. "Thank me for what?" "I nearly killed you." "You did nearly kill me, but that is not why I am here. I am here because of what you did after the fight ended. I helped you stand up." "Yes. And in doing so, you showed me something I had never considered before. You showed me that victory does not require cruelty. You showed me that strength can include compassion." He paused and seemed to struggle with his next words. "My people are proud warriors, and we have always believed that mercy is weakness. But you proved that belief wrong. You could have left me on the ground. You could have humiliated me in front of the entire Dominion. Instead, you treated me with dignity. You fought well, Una replied. You deserved respect. I tried to kill you. That was the job. I do not hold it against you. Torvak was silent for a long moment. I have spoken with my delegation, and I have made a recommendation that they have accepted. What recommendation? The Vrexian Empire is formally withdrawing all claims to the Kellis border region, and we are requesting the establishment of diplomatic relations with the human colonies in that area. Ambassador Chun stepped forward with obvious surprise. That is far more than the arena verdict required. I know, Torvak said, but the arena verdict was about territory. This is about something else. This is about what I learned today about humans. He looked at Una with eyes that held genuine respect. Your species does not fight the way other species fight. You do not seek to destroy your enemies. You seek to prove a point, and then you extend your hand in friendship. That is something the galaxy has never seen before. We have learned that enemies can become allies if you give them the chance. Una said, then I would like to be the first Vrexian to take that chance. He extended his clawed hand toward her, and she reached out and took it despite the protest of her wounded muscles. Sergeant Park, he said formally, I declare you a warrior worthy of Vrexian respect, and I declare humanity a species worthy of Vrexian alliance. The words echoed through the medical facility and were recorded by the news drones that had followed the Vrexian delegation. Within hours they would be broadcast across the entire Dominion, and billions of beings would hear that the mightiest warrior in the Vrexian Empire had declared humans worthy of alliance. It was a diplomatic victory that no one had anticipated, and it had been won not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through one woman's refusal to give up later that night. Una received a communication from Earth Command asking for her report on the mission. She considered how to summarize everything that had happened, all the pain and fear and determination that had led to this moment. Finally, she typed a simple response: mission successful. We made a friend. She looked across the medical bay to where Torvak was receiving his own treatment, and the Vrexian inclined his head in acknowledgement. They had entered the arena as enemies, representing species on the brink of war, and they had emerged as something else entirely. They had emerged as the beginning of something new. The Cathani Elder had been right when she said that the day's events were unprecedented, but she had underestimated what that would mean for the future. Humans had not just won a single arena battle, they had demonstrated a different way of being warriors, a way that valued persistence over power and compassion over conquest. And across the Dominion, beings of every species were beginning to reconsider their assumptions about the small soft creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable star. Perhaps the most dangerous thing about humans was not their stubbornness or their refusal to surrender. Perhaps the most dangerous thing was their belief that anyone could become a friend if you were willing to extend your hand and take the risk. That was the lesson Una Park had taught the galaxy, and it was a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The crucible of Kethvora hung in the darkness of space like a monument to ancient violence, and Sergeant Una Park stood at its entrance knowing that millions of eyes from 12 different species were about to watch her fight for her life. She had not asked for this honor, and she had not volunteered for this mission. But when the border incident between human colonists and Vrexian patrol ships had threatened to ignite a war that would consume 3 star systems, someone had to step into the arena. The rules of the Dominion were older than human spaceflight, and they were absolute in their simplicity. When 2 species could not resolve their differences through words, they resolved them through warriors. One champion from each side would enter the arena, and only through victory could a species claim the right to their position. Una walked through corridors carved from asteroid stone that had witnessed 400 cycles of combat, and the alien guards who escorted her did not bother to hide their amusement. She stood 5 feet and 6 inches tall, and she weighed 140 pounds. And by the standards of every species in the Dominion, she was small and soft and utterly unremarkable. The Vrexian delegation had sent Torvak, their greatest living champion, a warrior who had killed opponents from 9 different species and who had never once been defeated in single combat. He stood 7 feet tall with scales that could turn aside blade strikes, claws that dripped paralytic venom, and a tail strong enough to shatter bone when Yuna entered the preparation chamber across from him. Torvak looked at her and made a sound that the translation device rendered as laughter mixed with disappointment. "This is what humanity sends to face me," he said to his attendants without bothering to lower his voice. "I had hoped for a challenge, but instead they offer me prey." Yuna said nothing as she removed her outer uniform and stood in the simple combat garment that arena rules required. The rules forbade weapons of any kind, and they forbade armor or protective equipment, and they forbade any technological enhancement. Each warrior would enter with nothing but their natural body and whatever skills they had developed through training. The human diplomatic delegation watched from their viewing platform high above the arena floor, and Ambassador Chun could not keep the worry from his face as he studied the tactical display showing both combatants. Our medical scans show no genetic modifications, his aide reported quietly. No cybernetic implants, no chemical enhancements. She is baseline human in every measurable way. "I know," Chun replied. "That is exactly why Command selected her. I do not understand. Neither do the Vrexians. And that is the point." Down in the preparation chamber, Yuna completed her stretching routine and stood ready as the ancient doors began to grind open. Light flooded in from the arena beyond, and with it came the sound of thousands of alien voices raised in anticipation of bloodshed. She walked forward into that light without hesitation, and she did not look back. The arena floor was circular and vast, designed for species that stood twice her height and weighed 4 times her mass. Stone pillars rose at irregular intervals, and the ground was rough beneath her bare feet. And above her, the viewing platform stretched upward in tiers that seemed to reach toward the stars. Then Sylvestervac entered from the opposite side, and the crowd erupted with cheers and roars and sounds that human throats could never produce. He raised his arms in acknowledgement of their adulation, and his scales caught the arena lights and gleamed like polished obsidian. The Cathani elder, who served as arbiter, rose from her ceremonial seat and spread her 4 arms wide for "Silence, warriors of the Dominion," she announced in a voice that carried to every corner of the massive space. "You stand in the crucible where disputes are settled and honor is proven. The challenger from Vrex faces the champion from Earth, and the matter of the Kellis border shall be decided by their combat." She paused and looked down at both fighters with eyes that had witnessed more battles than any living being. "The rules are known to all. No weapons, no armor, no external aid. The fight continues until one warrior can no longer stand or until one warrior yields. May your ancestors watch with pride." The elder resumed her seat, and for a moment the arena fell completely silent. Yuna settled into a ready stance that would have looked familiar to any martial artist on Earth, and she kept her eyes fixed on Torvak as he began to circle toward her. "I will make this quick," he said. "Out of respect for your species, if nothing else. You talk a lot for someone who is supposed to be fighting." Yuna replied. Torvak's eyes narrowed at the disrespect, and in that instant of anger, he launched himself forward with speed that seemed impossible for a creature his size. Yuna had expected this, and she had trained for exactly this moment. But expectation and reality were very different things. His clawed hand caught her across the shoulder as she tried to dodge, and she felt the fabric of her garment tear and the hot wetness of blood begin to flow before she could recover. His tail swept her legs and sent her crashing to the stone floor. The impact drove the breath from her lungs, and for a terrible moment she could not move as Torvak loomed over her, Disappointing, he said. And he turned slightly to acknowledge the cheers of the crowd. That moment of showmanship was a mistake. And Yuna made him pay for it. She rolled to her feet and delivered a kick to the back of his knee that staggered him. And when he spun to face her, she was already moving, putting distance between them and reaching one of the stone pillars. Torvak roared with genuine anger now. And he charged again. This time his blow caught her full in the chest and lifted her off her feet. And she flew backward and struck a pillar with enough force to crack the ancient stone. She fell to the ground and did not move. And the Rexian delegation began to celebrate what they assumed was victory, but then something happened that made every alien in the arena fall silent with confusion. Yuna stood up. Blood ran from her shoulder and from a new cut on her forehead, and she moved stiffly as if every muscle protested the action. But she stood up and raised her hands into a fighting stance once more. "Is that all you have?" she asked. Torvik stared at her, and for the first time something other than contempt flickered in his reptilian eyes. He attacked again. And again he sent her crashing to the ground with blows that should have ended any fight. And again she stood up. The Cathani elder leaned forward in her seat, and her ancient eyes narrowed with sudden interest. "What manner of creature is this?" she murmured to her attendant. "That refuses to accept defeat, even when defeat has clearly found her on the arena floor." Yuna wiped blood from her eyes and watched Torvak approach for another assault. Her body screamed with pain, and she knew that she could not survive many more exchanges like the one she had already endured. But she also knew something that Torvak did not yet understand. She knew what humans were made of, and she knew that this fight was only beginning. Torvak had never known fear in combat until this moment, and the realization that he was afraid of the small bleeding humans standing before him was almost more disturbing than the fear itself. He had killed warriors from 9 different species, and he had faced opponents who were larger and stronger and better armed than Yuna Park. None of them had frightened him, but none of them had looked at him with eyes that held absolutely no surrender. And none of them had continued to rise after blows that should have shattered their will along with their bones. Human was not fighting him anymore. She was teaching him a lesson. And the lesson was that everything he thought he knew about combat was wrong. "I'm going to end this now," he declared. And he gathered every remaining scrap of his strength for a final assault. He opened his venom glands and let the paralytic toxin flow across his claws. And he coiled his tail for a strike that would crush whatever it hit. And he charged with speed that surprised even himself. Given his exhaustion, Yuna did not run. As she did not try to dodge, she stepped directly into his charge and let his venom claws rake across her stomach while she drove both of her fists into his throat. They both went down. The arena exploded with noise as every spectator tried to process what they had just witnessed. The Cathani elder was on her feet, her forearms spread wide as she called for silence. "Medical teams, stand ready," she commanded. "But do not enter the arena until the contest is decided on the blood-soaked stones." Torvik struggled to rise. The blows to his throat had damaged something important, and every breath he took was accompanied by a wet wheezing sound that spoke of internal injury. His limbs felt heavy and unresponsive, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be truly exhausted beside him. Yuna was also trying to rise. The venom from his claws was spreading through her system, and she could feel her muscles beginning to lock up in ways that made movement increasingly difficult. But she had been prepared for this. Human medical research had studied Rexian venom extensively, and while there was no way to fully counteract its effects, she knew that the paralysis was temporary and that continued movement could slow its spread. So she moved. She forced her trembling arms to push against the ground, and she forced her seizing legs to slide beneath her. And inch by inch she began to rise. Torvik watched with something approaching horror as the human who should have been completely incapacitated by his venom, continued to fight. Her way to her feet. "This is impossible," he rasped through his damaged throat. "You keep saying that," Yuna replied through gritted teeth, "and I keep proving you wrong." High above, the human delegation had fallen completely silent as they watched their champion's impossible struggle. Ambassador Chun had tears in his eyes that he did not bother to hide. "I have never seen anything like this," his aide whispered. "No one has," Chun replied. "She is showing the entire galaxy what humanity is capable of." Yuna finally reached her feet. Swaying dangerously but upright, Orvok was still on his knees. Struggling to draw breath and unable to make his limbs cooperate, she looked down at him and felt something unexpected. She felt pity. This warrior had spent his entire life believing that strength and speed and natural weapons were all that mattered in combat. And in the span of 1 hour she had destroyed that belief completely. He was not a monster or a villain. He was simply a product of his culture. And his culture had never taught him that there were other ways to fight. "Do you yield?" she asked. And her voice was hoarse but steady. Torvak looked up at her with eyes that reflected a complex mixture of emotions. Pride demanded that he continue fighting until he could no longer move. But wisdom told him that such stubbornness would only lead to his death. And beyond pride and wisdom, there was something else. There was respect. "I have never yielded in my life," he said slowly. "There is no shame in recognizing when you have been defeated. That is easy for you to say. You are the one still standing." "Barely," she admitted, and a ghost of a smile crossed her bloody face. "I am fairly certain I am going to collapse the moment this fight is officially over." "Then why do you not yield?" "Your wounds are severe, and my venom is in your blood. Because my people are counting on me. The border dispute is not worth your life. My life is not what I am risking," she replied. "I am risking everything I believe in. I am risking the idea that determination matters more than strength. I am risking the principle that humans do not abandon their duty, no matter how hard things get." She took a step closer to him, and the movement cost her visibly. "If I yield now, I prove that humans can be beaten by anyone willing to hurt us badly enough. But if I stand until the end, I prove that there is no amount of pain or punishment that can make us give up." Torvak was silent. For a long moment. "Your species frightens me," he finally admitted. "We frighten everyone eventually. That is not a boast." "No," she agreed. "It is a warning. Humans are coming into the galactic community, and we are not going to be pushed around by anyone. Not because we are stronger or faster or more advanced, but because we simply will not stop trying." She extended her hand toward him. "Not in attack, but in something else entirely. Now I am going to ask you again. Do you yield?" Torvak looked at her hand, and then at her face, and then at the sea of alien spectators who were watching in absolute silence. Thought about his people and their territorial ambitions. And he thought about the war that would consume millions of lives if this dispute was not resolved. And he thought about the small human female who had taken everything he could throw at her and was still standing. He reached up and took her hand. "I yield." The words echoed through the arena. And for a moment, no one seemed to believe what they had heard. The champion of Rex, undefeated in 50 battles, had surrendered to a human who stood half his height and weighed a third of his. Master Cathani Elder raised her arms, and her voice carried to every corner of the massive space. "The contest is decided. The human Unipark has defeated the Vrexian Torvak. The matter of the Kellis border is settled in humanity's favor." The human delegation erupted in celebration, and Ambassador Chun allowed himself to hope that the war he had feared was finally averted. But down on the arena floor, something unexpected was happening. Juna had not released Torvak's hand. Instead, she was helping him to his feet, supporting his weight as he struggled to stand on exhausted legs. "What are you doing?" he asked with confusion. "Helping you up," she replied as if this were obvious. "Why?" "I am your enemy." "No," she said. "You are my opponent." There is a difference. The arena fell silent once more as every being present tried to understand what they were. Witnessing the human had won. And now she was showing kindness to the warrior who had nearly killed her. This was not how things were supposed to work. The Cavani Elder had lived for 300 cycles and had witnessed more arena battles than she could count. But she had never seen anything like what was happening on the stone floor below her. The human female called Yuna Park had been fighting for nearly an hour now. And by every reasonable measure, she should have been dead many times over. Her body was a canvas of wounds, and her blood had painted the arena stones in patterns that would have horrified the medical staff of any species, but she was still standing, and more than standing. She was fighting back with increasing effectiveness. "Explain this to me," demanded the Vrexian ambassador, who had taken a seat near the elder when it became clear that this battle was not going to end quickly. "How is this possible? Your champion is discovering what I learned many cycles ago when I first studied humans." The elder replied, "They are persistence predators. I do not understand the term. On their homeworld, humans did not evolve to be the fastest or the strongest creatures. They could not outrun their prey, and they could not overpower it in direct confrontation. Then how did they survive? They followed," the elder said simply. "When they identified prey, they would begin to track it, and they would not stop tracking it until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. It did not matter if the prey was faster, because eventually it would need to rest and the humans would catch up. It did not matter if the prey was stronger, because eventually its strength would fade and the humans would still be coming." The Vrexian ambassador watched the arena floor where Torvak was visibly struggling to maintain his combat effectiveness. "You are saying that my champion is being hunted. I am saying that your champion has never faced an opponent who simply refuses to acknowledge defeat. Every other species he has fought has understood when they were beaten and has either surrendered or died. Humans do not seem to share that understanding on the floor below." Yuna was implementing a strategy that had crystallized in her mind over the course of the brutal fight. She had stopped trying to hurt Torvak and had started trying to exhaust him. Every time he attacked, she would take the blow and then immediately counterattack. Not with force, but with persistence. She targeted the same spots over and over. The gaps between his scales at the joints, the sensitive tissue around his eyes, the thin skin on the underside of his tail. None of her strikes caused significant damage on their own. But the cumulative effect was becoming apparent. Ervak had started to flinch when she aimed for certain areas, and his movements had become defensive rather than aggressive. The hunter was becoming the hunted. Stand still and die properly. Torvak snarled as Yuna slipped away from another of his increasingly desperate attacks. "You first. This is not how warriors fight." "This is exactly how warriors fight," Yuna replied. "At least how human warriors fight. We do not care about honor or glory or any of that nonsense. We care about winning. There is no honor in what you are doing. There is no honor in losing either." She ducked under a tail sweep and drove her knee into the back of his leg, hitting the same spot she had targeted a dozen times before. This time something gave way, and Torvak stumbled and nearly fell. The crowd gasped as the undefeated champion of Rex showed weakness for all to see. High in the human delegation's viewing platform, Ambassador Chun had stopped worrying and started hoping. "She is actually going to do it," he breathed. "She is going to beat him. Do not celebrate yet," his military advisor cautioned. "She is badly injured. If he lands one more solid blow, it could be over. But look at him. He can barely stand. Neither can she. This fight is going to be decided by whoever falls first. That assessment proved accurate as the next several minutes unfolded. Duna and Torvak had both reached the limits of their endurance, and the fight had become a brutal test of will rather than skill. He would attack and she would survive and counterattack. And he would defend and she would press the advantage until he drove her back. Neither fighter had the strength left for decisive action, and the arena had fallen into a tense silence as the spectators watched two exhausted warriors refuse to surrender. "You have earned my respect," Torvak admitted during a pause in the combat. "No opponent has ever pushed me this far." "I do not want your respect," Una replied. "I want you to fall down. Why do you fight so hard? The border dispute is not worth dying for. Everything is worth fighting for when you have people counting on you." She thought of the colonists on the Kellis worlds who would suffer if the Vrexians claimed the territory. And she thought of the soldiers who would die if this dispute escalated to war. And she thought of her squad who had always known they could count on her to keep going no matter what. That was who she was. She was the one who kept going. Years ago on a frozen moon, she had walked 40 miles on a broken ankle to get help for her injured teammates. And the medics had told her that what she had done was physically impossible. She had done it anyway. This fight was no different. "I am going to tell you something about humans," she said as she raised her fists once more. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. Then what are you? We are the most stubborn," she said. "We do not know how to give up. We do not understand the concept of defeat. When we get knocked down, we get back up. When we fail, we try again. When someone tells us something is impossible, we do it anyway, just to prove them wrong." Torvak studied her with eyes that had lost their earlier contempt. "I am starting to believe you." "Good, because I am not finished yet." She attacked with everything she had left, which was not much but was apparently more than Torvak had anticipated. Her fist found the gap beneath his jaw again and again, and her kicks targeted his weakened knee until he could barely put weight on that leg. He struck back with diminishing force, and each blow she absorbed seemed to take more out of him than it did out of her. Kavani Elder rose from her seat in recognition of what she was witnessing. "This is unprecedented," she announced to those around her. "In 400 cycles of arena combat, no warrior has ever demonstrated such absolute refusal to accept defeat. She is going to win," someone said with disbelief. "Perhaps," the elder replied. "Or perhaps she will fall at the last moment. But either way, she has already achieved something remarkable." "What is that?" "She has shown us what humans are truly made of on the arena floor." Una Park felt her legs trembling with exhaustion and her vision narrowing to a tunnel focused only on her opponent. She did not know if she could win this fight, but she knew with absolute certainty that she would not lose it. She would keep standing until her body physically could not stand anymore. And even then she would probably try to crawl. That was the human way. That was her way. And Torvak was finally beginning to understand that no amount of strength or speed or natural weapons could overcome an opponent who simply refused to stop fighting. The arena had grown quiet in a way that made the Vrexian delegation uncomfortable, and Torvak himself had stopped playing to the crowd as he circled the human who simply refused to fall. He had struck her 7 times now with blows that had killed warriors from stronger species, and 7 times she had risen from the ground and lifted her hands to continue fighting. This was not how combat was supposed to work. "Why do you keep standing?" he demanded. And there was something in his voice that had not been there before. "You cannot win this fight. Your body is broken. Your blood stains the stones. Accept your defeat and yield." Una spat blood onto the arena floor and shook her head slowly. "I have not lost yet. You are delusional. The damage I have inflicted would have ended any other opponent." "I am not any other opponent," she replied. I am human. Torvak snarled and launched another attack. And this time, Una did not try to dodge or block. She let his clawed hand rake across her ribs and used the moment of contact to drive her elbow into the soft tissue beneath his jaw. The Vrexian staggered backward with a grunt of surprise, and the crowd gasped as one. It was the first time anyone had seen Torvak react to a blow in over 50 fights high above the arena floor. Ambassador Chen leaned forward with sudden hope. She heard him. Barely, his aide replied. His scales absorbed most of the impact, but she found a gap. She is learning how to fight him in the viewing platform reserved for neutral observers. The Cathani elder was explaining the same thing to those around her. Watch closely, she said. The human is not fighting the way she fought at the beginning. She has changed her approach. Changed how? Asked the young diplomat from the Deshan Federation. She is no longer trying to match his strength. She is trying to outlast it. That seems foolish. She is clearly the weaker combatant. Is she? The elder replied with a thin smile. Strength takes many forms, and endurance is one of them. On the arena floor, Una had retreated to create space between herself and Torvak, and she used that moment to assess her situation. Her left arm was not working properly, and at least 2 of her ribs were cracked. And she had lost enough blood that her vision was starting to blur at the edges. But she had also learned something important in those brutal opening exchanges. Torvak was fast and incredibly powerful, but he was not built for extended combat. His species had evolved as ambush predators who struck from hiding and killed their prey in seconds. And everything about his fighting style reflected that heritage. He threw everything into each attack, expecting it to be the last one he would need. And when his opponent survived, he had to pause and gather himself before striking again. Those pauses were getting longer. You are tired, Una said, and she saw his eyes widen slightly at the observation. You have never had to work this hard for a kill. I am not tired, Torvak growled. But his breathing had grown heavier, and his movements had lost some of their earlier fluidity. My people have a saying, Una continued. It is not the size of the fighter that matters. It is the size of the fight and the fighter. Pretty words will not save you. No, she agreed. But time might. She launched her own attack then, not aiming for his vital areas, but for his joints and pressure points. Her strikes were not powerful enough to cause serious damage through his scales, but they forced him to react and defend. And each reaction cost him energy that he could not easily replace. The fight became something that none of the watching aliens had ever seen before. Torvak continued to land devastating blows that should have ended any contest. And Una continued to absorb those blows and rise again and again and again. But with each exchange, the Vrexian grew slower and the human grew more precise. She was learning his patterns, memorizing his tells, finding the rhythm of his attacks and the gaps in his defenses. This is impossible, said the Deshan diplomat who had questioned the elder earlier. No creature should be able to take that kind of punishment and keep fighting. You do not know humans, the elder replied. I have studied their history. I have read their records. They are perhaps the most stubborn species the galaxy has ever produced. Stubborn is not the same as strong, is it not? Strength fades, speed diminishes, but stubbornness, that can last forever. Torvak cornered Una against the arena wall, and for a moment it seemed that the fight was finally over. He raised both clawed hands for an execution strike, and his tail coiled behind him ready to deliver a crushing blow. If his claws failed, the human had nowhere to run and no way to defend herself against the assault that was coming. The Vrexian delegation rose to their feet in anticipation of victory, and the human delegation bowed their heads in preparation for defeat. But then Una did something unexpected. She smiled. It was not a smile of surrender or acceptance, and it was not the desperate grin of someone who had lost their grip on reality. It was the smile of a predator who had finally maneuvered her prey exactly where she wanted it. Avak hesitated in 400 cycles of arena combat. No opponent had ever smiled at him in the moment before death, and the expression on the human's bloody face unsettled him in ways he could not explain. "Why do you smile?" he demanded. "You are beaten." "Am I?" Yuna asked. "Look at yourself, champion of Rex. You are breathing like you have run 1,000 miles. Your scales are dull with exhaustion. Your claws are trembling with the effort of holding them up. I can still kill you, maybe," she admitted, "but can you kill me before you collapse? Because I am going to keep getting up, Torvak. I am going to keep getting up until one of us cannot move anymore. And I do not think that is going to be me." The arena fell silent as every being present processed what they were witnessing. The small human who should have died in the first minute of combat was still standing after nearly 30 minutes of brutal punishment, and the greatest warrior the Rexian species had ever produced were showing the first signs of true fatigue. "What are you?" Torvik whispered. "I am human," Yuna replied. "And we do not know how to quit." She pushed off from the wall and raised her fists once more, and the blood that dripped from her wounds seemed less like evidence of defeat and more like war paint marking a warrior who had earned her place in this ancient arena. The fight was not over, it was only beginning to show its true nature.